Welcome back to True Ghost Vault. Tonight, we're venturing deep into the most unsettling stories hidden in the Appalachian wilderness. Not rumors, not campfire tales. These are first-hand accounts, 3 harrowing encounters that drove ordinary hikers to the edge of sanity. In the first, a lone backpacker sets out to escape the noise of his life, only to find that something ancient was already waiting for him among the trees. In the second, 2 friends climb a forgotten fire tower in search of starlight and discover something that wears human faces like a costume. And in the third, a young man fleeing his broken family finds refuge in an old cabin until he realizes the carved trees around him are more than just symbols. Each of these stories leaves behind the same haunting question: when you step off the trail, who or what is already watching? Story 1. The Red Cloth in Elkins Hollow. I never set out looking for anything except a little peace. The Elkins Hollow Trail had been recommended to me by a park ranger in Boone, who said it was quiet as the grave. At the time, that sounded like exactly what I needed, somewhere I could shut out the fluorescent glare of the world and let my mind reset. But silence can be a dangerous thing. When the woods swallow every footstep and the wind never stirs the branches, you start to feel like you've slipped into some place that doesn't belong to you. I thought I was careful. I planned every mile, marked every waypoint, packed extra batteries and backup maps. None of it mattered, because the first night I camped in that hollow, something marked me in return. A strip of red cloth I never tied, footprints that circled my tent, a smell that sank into my hair and my skin sweet and metallic like rotting syrup. I'm not telling this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling it because if you ever decide to camp alone in Elkins Hollow, I need you to remember it isn't empty. It's never been empty. Chapter 1. The Scent That Followed. I set out from the trailhead just after dawn, the air so cold it felt like it was trying to peel the skin off my cheeks. My pack was heavier than it should have been. I kept telling myself that was a good thing. It meant I had everything I needed. A map folded into quadrants, a compass with a cracked cover, freeze-dried meals I knew I'd hate, and a small hunting knife my father had given me the year he stopped believing in the idea of safe places. The Elkins Hollow Loop wasn't on any glossy brochure. It was a line on an old survey map I'd found in the Boone Library archives, a faint pencil track marked only with the word primitive. Primitive sounded perfect. Primitive meant no crowds. The first day was uneventful. I walked 12 miles without seeing another soul. No footprints in the mud, no cigarette butts or candy wrappers or the stupid little cairns that tourists love to stack. Just me and the trees. And eventually even the trees started to feel thin, as if they were only a screen over something waiting underneath. That night I made camp by a dry creek bed ringed with stools the size of my head. I set my top low, crawled inside, and listened to the quiet. It was a true quiet, not the hush of dusk or the lull before a storm, but a stillness that pressed against the eardrums. I was so tired I didn't even bother cooking. I ate half a protein bar, drank cold water, and lay back on my sleeping pad with my boots still laced. That's when the smell began. It wasn't strong at first, just a faint sweetness, like the syrup my mother used to drizzle on pancakes. But then it deepened sour at the edges and then sharper metallic. The air grew heavy with it until each breath felt like it left residue in my throat. I sat up, shining my headlamp in a slow circle. No movement, no eye shine. I checked my pack to see if something had leaked: a fuel canister, a punctured pouch of food, but everything was intact. The smell clung to me. It soaked into my clothes and hair as though it had weight. I tried to tell myself it was decay from something dead in the brush. A raccoon, maybe a deer, but no animal carcass would have made that precise sweetness. It didn't fade when I zipped myself into the top. It didn't fade when I pressed my nose to the crook of my elbow to breathe my own skin. Sometime after midnight, I must have drifted off because I woke to the sound of crunching leaves. Just a single step, then a pause. Another step. The smell was stronger now, so thick it felt like a liquid. I reached for the knife, not daring to unzip the top. My heart drummed so hard, I was afraid it would draw attention. Another step. Closer. I don't know how long I stayed there, muscles locked, knife clenched. Maybe hours. At some point, the steps stopped. The smell did not. When the sky finally paled, I forced myself out of the top. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the knife. I walked a slow circle around my campsite. That was when I saw them footprints. They were clear as pressed wax in the damp soil, circling the top once then again. The toes pointed inward. No boot tread. No sign of weight shifting. Just that inward cant that made me feel something in my chest collapse. Whatever had left them hadn't left the way it came. The last print ended behind my top, as if the thing had simply folded itself into the earth. I didn't eat. I didn't pack neatly. I jammed everything into my pack, shouldered it, and started walking north, where the map said the trail would climb the ridge. The smell followed me. It never grew weaker, only changed, sometimes sharper, like blood in the heat, sometimes sweet again, cloying like rotten fruit. I hiked until my legs burned, until my breath came ragged and raw, and still the air tasted wrong. I didn't look back. Chapter 2. Footprints in the ash. I thought if I just kept moving, the smell would burn off, that I'd leave whatever it was behind me, some patch of spoiled air, trapped in the low hollow. But after the first mile climbing the ridge, I realized it wasn't a place I'd left. It was something that had attached itself to me. The trail was so faint, it barely deserved the name. Most of the time, I walked by compass bearings, checking the angle of the sun, hoping I wouldn't miss the next landmark on the map. The trees were older here, thick-barked oaks with trunks blackened at the base as if they'd once burned and never healed. I came to a break in the trees near midday. There was a clearing where someone had built a fire ring out of stacked stones. The inside was filled with a mound of gray ash, so deep it looked like it had been burning for years. I stepped closer, hoping to find some sign that a person had made this, some fresh boot prints maybe, or an old can of beans, anything human. But the only footprints were bare. They were pressed deep into the ash, each toe distinct. They circled the mound twice, then stopped, as if whoever had made them simply disappeared mid-step. The ash itself was undisturbed between the prints, no drag marks or scuffs, just those perfect impressions. I felt something slip in my chest then. A realization I didn't want. This was the same gait, the same inward-turned stance as the prints I'd seen around my top. I backed away, careful not to step in them. Every instinct was screaming at me to keep moving, but my legs felt hollow. I turned and walked as fast as I could, fighting the tremor in my hands. For a few minutes, I tried to convince myself it was a prank, some elaborate trick left by a survivalist or a bored local. But the longer I thought about it, the more I knew that was a lie. By late afternoon, the ridge leveled out into a stand of white pines. The sky was pale with the promise of rain. My shoulders ached from the weight of the pack. I stopped long enough to drink from a stream and to rub the ache out of my calves. That's when I noticed something new. On a low branch, a strip of cloth hung motionless. Red, same color as the one I'd found near my top. I didn't touch it. I didn't even get closer. I checked my own pack, unbuckled the side pocket, where I'd kept the spare shirt I'd torn for trail markers, all accounted for. This wasn't mine. I stood there for a long time, watching it sway almost imperceptibly, as if something was breathing near it. That was when I knew whatever it was marking my path in return. I kept walking, not caring that I was heading deeper into the unmarked sections of the forest. The smell grew stronger. It had a sweetness that made me gag and wipe my tongue with my sleeve. Around dusk, I found another clearing, this one dominated by a massive stump, sheared flat at the top as if by a blade. On it rested something small and dark. I almost left it alone. I should have, but curiosity is a disease in places like this. I walked closer, and when I finally saw it clearly, my mouth went dry. It was a photograph. The edges were scorched black, but the center was clear. It was me, standing by the stream. I'd stopped at just hours before, crouched with my hands in the water. There had been no one there, no sound, no shutter click. The smell thickened around me, syrupy and metallic. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a root. I left the photo on the stump. I didn't look back. By the time I set camp, darkness had folded over everything like a curtain. I didn't make a fire. I didn't eat. I crawled inside my top and held the knife against my chest. Every hour or so I'd hear it again, leaves shifting, slow steps in a wide circle around where I lay. Sometimes closer, sometimes further, but never gone. The smell never left. At some point, I stopped expecting morning to come.
Chapter 3. A Name Waiting to be Carved.
When dawn finally bled through the pines, it looked sickly and thin, as if the light itself didn't want to touch the hollow. My whole body felt leaden. The smell was still, clinging to me, heavy as a second skin. I didn't eat or even brush the dirt from my hair. I packed everything in a daze, one eye always scanning the tree line. Part of me was convinced I'd see a face there, something pale and patient, watching. I tried to follow the map again, but nothing looked right anymore. Every bend in the trail felt like I'd already walked it. Every crooked stump looked like the last. By mid-morning, the wind picked up. It carried the smell with it, made it seem to seep out of every shadow. My compass needle twitched in little spasms. I stopped trying to pretend I knew where I was going. I just walked. Sometime after noon, I stumbled onto an old hunting shack. The roof sagged, and the windows were sheets of plywood nailed unevenly over the frames. It looked abandoned. I wanted to believe it was abandoned, but when I stepped inside, the air felt warmer, as if someone had only recently left. There were carvings over every wall, not symbols, just names. Dozens of them scraped into the wood with a knife or some jagged tool. The oldest names were faded, nearly erased by time, but others looked fresh. One in particular stood out. It was carved at shoulder height, the letters neat and careful. My own name, not the short version I used day to day, but the full one, the name my mother only used when she was angry or scared. It was so new that when I ran a fingertip over it, a curl of pale wood fell away. That was when I heard the first voice. It came from outside, soft and almost embarrassed, like someone practicing how to say my name. I turned to the door, knife in hand. Silence. Then the voice again, closer, this time. My name spoken carefully, syllable by syllable. I backed away, nearly tripping over an old tin bucket. My breath came in ragged gasps. The voice circled the shack, never raising above a whisper. I pressed my back against the far wall and watched the doorway. A shadow crossed the crack between the boards. I didn't think. I ran. I burst into the trees, stumbling, heart slamming. I didn't stop until my legs gave out and I fell to my knees in the wet moss. The wind died all at once, and the smell was waiting. I don't remember how long I knelt there head down, but when I finally looked up, the trees had shifted. They were closer, and hanging from a branch in front of me was another strip of red cloth. This time a word had been scrawled across it in something dark and rusty. Stay. I started to cry then, not from fear exactly, but from the horrible certainty that no matter how far I walked, I was never leaving this place. I wiped my face with the sleeve crusted in old sap. My hand came away, streaked with red. I forced myself upright. I didn't know where to go, so I walked in the only direction I hadn't tried uphill, toward a break in the canopy where the sky looked fractionally brighter. Every step felt watched. Every shift of leaves behind me felt deliberate. I told myself over and over, keep going, keep going. The last thing I remember before the light failed was passing a dead tree with a gash so deep it looked like a mouth. Carved inside were more letters. Not my name this time, just 3 words: we found you. I don't know how I made it out. People always want the simple version: which trail you took, which landmark you followed, where you finally crossed back into safety. But there was no map by then, no plan. Just one foot in front of the other, while my mind unraveled behind my eyes. By the time I stumbled into a ranger station that looked half condemned, I couldn't even remember how many days I'd been out there. My clothes were stiff with old sweat and sap. My pack was mostly empty. I must have dropped things without realizing it. The ranger who found me didn't ask many questions. He just looked me over with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much already and handed me a paper cup of water. I tried to explain the footprints, the voice, the cloth, but as soon as I said it out loud, it sounded impossible, even to me. They kept me overnight in a little concrete room with a cot and a single barred window. I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid of whatever I'd left behind, but because I was terrified that it hadn't been left behind at all. When I finally walked out into the daylight, I felt something shift in the air. A subtle pressure, as if someone was still watching from the tree line. I didn't look back. I never went back. But even now, years later, sometimes, I wake in the dark and smell that same sweetness clinging to the sheets. And when I do, I wait, because I know that if I move too fast, if I breathe too loud, it might finish what it started. Story 2. The Fire Tower at Raven Bluff. Some places don't just feel haunted, they feel watchful. Raven Bluff was like that from the first moment I saw it. The tower stood above the tree line like a rusted crown, every bolt and steel beam groaning in the wind. Ben swore it would be worth it. You've never seen stars like this, he promised. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there were still places left where beauty hadn't been swallowed by noise and human garbage. But as we hiked deeper along that hidden trail, I started to notice the quiet. Not the gentle hush of night, but a hollow kind of silence, as if the trees themselves were waiting for something. It was too late to turn back by the time I realized I was listening more for footsteps than for birdsong. Too late to leave when I started to feel like the shadows under the tower weren't empty. I wish I trusted that first shiver that crawled up my neck. I wish I told Ben we needed to go home, because once you climb Raven Bluff, it's already too late. Chapter 1. The Circle of Bones. We left the cabin around 9 p.m., our flashlights jittering across the overgrown trail. Ben led the way, his steps too casual for the darkness swallowing us. I tried to match his confidence, but every time I swung my beam into the trees, I half expected to see something standing there. The first mile wasn't so bad, just roots and old bottles someone had tossed into the brush decades ago. But as we climbed higher up the bluff, the air got colder, still, like it was holding its breath. About halfway up, we found the first sign that we'd crossed into somewhere we weren't supposed to be. A clearing opened up between the trees ringed by tall grass. In the center stood a circle of bones. Not just a scattering and arranged pattern, precise as clockwork. Skulls small and dark with age. Long bones laid end to end in almost forming a spiral. I stopped so abruptly that Ben bumped into me. What he hissed. I lifted my flashlight. The beam touched the nearest skull. Empty sockets stared back. Ben swallowed. Probably just someone's sick idea of art. But his voice wavered. I took a step closer against every instinct in my body. Each skull had been drilled in the forehead. Perfect, round holes, all the same size. And as I circled, my boot brushed something. A fragment of faded cloth, tangled in the grass. I picked it up without thinking. It was red, the same color as the strip I'd found last year when I camped alone. I dropped it. A wind moved through the clearing, though none of the grass bent. Ben shivered. Let's keep going. We did, but I never stopped feeling like something had watched us from behind that circle, something that hadn't moved but was still closer every time I looked away. The trail got worse past the clearing, if you could call it a trail at all. We climbed over rotting logs and ducked under branches so low they raked lines across my jacket. Every now and then I turned my head and see nothing. And yet I felt sure that if I turned a second too slow, I'd catch something standing just behind me. We reached the base of the fire tower after midnight. It rose out of the blackness like a skeleton's steel ribs catching the moonlight. Ben flashed a grin that didn't touch his eyes. See? Not so bad. I didn't answer. There was a smell here, faint but wrong. Sweet rot, the same note I tasted in the hollow. I tilted my headlamp up, tracing the beams of the tower. That's when I saw it, another strip of red cloth tied around a rung halfway up. It fluttered once, though there was no wind. I looked at Ben. He was staring at it too, his mouth working, but no words coming out. Let's get up there, I said. My voice sounded thin. We climbed in silence, the metal steps groaning under our boots. About 20 feet up, I looked down. The clearing was empty. But just before I turned away, something moved along the grass, a pale shape, slow and deliberate, circling where the bones had been. I didn't tell Ben. I didn't know how to. When we reached the top platform, I realized I was gripping the railing so hard, my knuckles were white. Ben spread out his sleeping bag, trying to pretend none of this was strange. He forced a laugh and said, "Stars, man. Told you." And for a moment it did almost feel normal. The sky was endless, a blanket of cold fire. But then I caught a movement below, a figure stepping from the tree line into the clearing. It was too far to see clearly, just a tall silhouette, watching. Ben followed my gaze. His breath hissed between his teeth. Neither of us spoke, and neither of us slept. Chapter 2. Something that climbed wrong. We didn't speak after we saw it. Whatever that figure was, it stood in the clearing for nearly an hour, never shifting, never raising a hand, just watching. Ben tried to pretend he hadn't seen it. He busied himself with his stove, boiling water for instant noodles he didn't end up eating. I sat with my back against the little hut at the top of the tower, knife across my knees. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Ben dozed off in his sleeping bag. I envied him for that. I couldn't close my eyes because every time I blinked, I imagined that figure starting to climb. The sky began to haze over with clouds. The stars dimmed. The cold bit deeper. That was when I heard it. A scraping noise below the platform. Soft at first, like a rope brushing steel. Then sharper, rhythmic. I crawled to the edge and looked down. Something was climbing the tower. Not on the stairs, on the beams themselves. long limbs bent the wrong way, joints jerking like a puppet pulled by tangled strings. The head lolled back, and I saw that its face, or what passed for one, was smooth and pale like the surface of a mushroom. It didn't look up. It didn't need to. I felt its attention the way you feel heat against your skin. I tried to wake Ben. My voice came out a whisper I couldn't force louder. "Ben." He stirred, but didn't open his eyes. I looked back over the edge. The thing was halfway up. One hand gripped these rusted beam fingers, too long, too thin. I backed away, nearly tripping over the stove. My heartbeat drummed in my teeth. Ben finally sat up. What I clamped a hand over his mouth and pointed. His eyes widened. He didn't ask questions. We crouched, low backs pressed to the hut as the thing climbed higher. When it was nearly level with the platform, it stopped. The head tilted just a fraction, listening. Then, in a voice that was not a voice at all, more like a recording played through cracked speakers, it said, "My name." Flat, careful. I didn't answer. It said it again, closer, to the right inflection. Ben's hand found mine in the dark. He was shaking so badly, it felt like a small earthquake. Then, without warning, the thing moved. It crawled onto the platform limbs, unfolding with that same awful precision. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was no more than 10 feet away now. The head tilted again, as if studying me. Then it began to crawl forward. I heard my own breath come out in short, pathetic sounds. That was when Ben acted. He grabbed the pot of boiling water and flung it. The water splashed across the creature's shoulder. Steam rose, carrying that same sickly sweet smell I'd known too well. It recoiled not in pain, but in something closer to confusion. Ben didn't wait. He pulled me to my feet and shoved me toward the stairs. I didn't think. I climbed over the railing and swung myself onto the beams, skidding down until my boots hit the crossbars below. Ben followed, metal groaning under our weight. Halfway down, I risked a glance up. The thing was still on the platform, crouched at the edge. It cocked its head as if debating whether to follow. Then it reached up and touched the place where the water had hit. Its hand came away red. It lifted its palm to its featureless face, smearing that color across the pale surface. Then it whispered again. My name. I didn't wait to hear it a third time. Chapter 3. The Perfect Imitation. When our boots hit the ground, I expected it to leap after us, to come skittering down the beams, joints snapping in that impossible rhythm. But nothing moved above. The platform stayed dark and still, as if it had never held anything at all. Ben didn't wait to wonder. He grabbed my arm and we ran plunging back into the trees. Branches tore at my sleeves, scratched shallow lines across my face. The cold had sunk into my bones. My teeth clattered with every breath. We didn't stop until the tower was long out of sight. Only then did Ben let go. We need to keep moving, he said, voice hoarse. I nodded. I couldn't get the image out of my mind, its hand touching the smear of red, pressing it to that smooth, absent face. We kept to the trail, or what was left of it. But no matter how far we walked, I couldn't shake the sense that something was matching our pace. Just beyond the tree line, every so often I'd catch a shape in the corner of my eye, a pale sliver gone when I turned. By dawn, the path forked around a shallow gully. Ben wanted to cross the low side, but I insisted on higher ground. I needed the illusion of seeing farther. We climbed a ridge of mossy stones. At the top, I stopped. Ahead, the trees opened into another clearing, and in the center stood a figure. At first, I thought it was a man. It wore a tattered flannel shirt, dark with old stains. It stood with its head bent forward, arms limp at its sides, but then it looked up. The face was wrong. Not featureless like the thing on the tower, worse. It was my face. I didn't mean to move closer. My feet just went. Every step felt like walking into a vacuum. No birds, no wind, no heartbeat in my ears, only silence. And that thing wearing my skin, it raised a hand slow and awkward as if testing the motion. Its mouth opened. And in my own voice, perfect in every cadence, it whispered, "Ben." Ben sucked in a ragged breath behind me. "Don't," he said, barely audible. The thing took a step. I stumbled back. My boot slid on damp leaves. It took another step. And again, in that flawless imitation, "Ben." This time it almost sounded gentle. Ben pulled me behind him, knife drawn. The thing tilted its head, studying us. Then it smiled. I hadn't known it was possible to hate your own face. I looked into its eyes, or the spaces that should have been eyes, and felt something inside me crumple. Because in that hollow gaze, there was recognition. Not of me as prey, but as something it already owned. Ben backed us away inch by inch, never dropping his stare. When we reached the trees, the thing didn't follow. It just stood there, mouth still twisted into that monstrous attempt at kindness. We turned and ran. By the time we found the logging road, the sun was overhead. My legs refused to hold me. I dropped to my knees in the mud, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Ben crouched beside me. He didn't try to speak, and for that, I was grateful, because there was nothing left to say. I don't remember walking back to the cabin. Only the brightness of the logging road, the way my boots slipped in the mud, how Ben never once let go of my arm. When we reached the porch, the silence was almost worse than the voice. No wind, no insects, no distant animal calls. Just the hush of something that didn't need to follow, because it already knew where we lived. Ben tried to laugh. A single broken sound. He said we were imagining it, that the night had gotten inside our heads, but I saw the way his eyes kept flicking to the tree line. I wanted to believe him. I tried. By morning we were already packing. Neither of us said the word monster or ghost, but the air between us held the shape of it. Before we left, I stepped around the back of the cabin to piss. That's when I saw the prints. 2 sets, bare feet, long wide toes, pressed into the wet earth, right up to the wall. I didn't call for Ben. I didn't point them out. Some truths don't need witnesses. When we drove away, I didn't look back. But sometimes late at night, I see that thing again. The way it wore my face like a mask. It hadn't figured out how to move yet. And I remember the smile, the way it felt almost proud, like it had been waiting for me to understand something. I think I know what it was trying to tell me, that it never needed to chase me. Because once you've seen it once, you've heard your own voice echoing back in the dark. You belong to it. Story 3. The Carved Trees of Franklin Creek. The summer my parents finally destroyed whatever was left of their marriage, I stopped going home after school. I'd sit in my car with the engine off, pretending I was somewhere else, anywhere else. When it got bad enough, I texted my mom and told her I needed to leave for a while. She didn't ask where, she just wrote, "Okay, be safe." That's how I ended up in Franklin Creek, the place my uncle always called quiet country. I didn't know that in Franklin Creek, quiet doesn't mean peace. It means absence. No bird song, no dogs barking, no voices carried from neighboring fields. And when the wind stopped, you could almost hear the trees thinking. I went there because I thought the silence would help me breathe, but I didn't understand what it meant to be truly alone, or what could find you when no one else was listening. Chapter 1. The Wrong Circle. My Uncle Travis wasn't much for conversation. He picked me up from the bus station in his old truck, the cab reeking of stale sunflower seeds. He didn't ask why I'd come, didn't offer any comfort. When we pulled up to his cabin, he just killed the engine and stared out across the tree line. "You don't stay out after dark," he said finally, voice flat. "And you don't follow carved trees." That was it, my orientation to Franklin Creek. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. A sagging porch, a screen door that banged in the slightest breeze. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and mold. I should have left right then, but there was nowhere else. The first couple of days was so quiet, I thought maybe this was what I needed. I'd walk the trails with no destination, trying to convince myself the silence was healing. But it wasn't. It was just empty. On the fourth morning, I found the first carving, a triangle gouged deep into the bark of a sycamore, with a smaller triangle nested inside it. The cuts looked fresh. Sap bled slowly from the edges. I stopped hand hovering over the trunk. Something about it made my teeth ache. I thought about what Travis had said, "Don't follow carved trees." But it wasn't a trail, not exactly. Just one mark. I walked on. That evening, I asked him what the symbols meant. He didn't look up from his plate. "Don't touch them," he said. "Don't follow. Don't ask again." He never spoke another word to me that night. The next morning, I woke before dawn uneasy. I dressed in the half-light and stepped outside. The air tasted metallic, like old coins. I hadn't planned on hiking so early, but something tugged at me, a restless pressure behind my ribs. I took the narrow path behind the woodpile, winding down toward the creek. About a mile in, I found more carvings, circles intersecting with crosses, lines slashed so deep they nearly split the trunks. I told myself I was only curious, but the further I went, the more I knew I was being led. Just past a collapsed fence, the trees opened into a clearing. At the center was a ring of stones, perfectly round, each rock white and polished, laid with a care that felt old. Inside the ring, the grass was dead, and in the center of the dead patch stood a stump. It looked freshly cut, pale as bone in the dim light. A noose hung from the branch overhead, swaying gently though there was no wind. I don't know how long I stood there. When I finally stepped back, I heard it. A breath, long and deliberate, like someone savoring the cold air. I turned, but the trees were empty. And then, from behind the stump, a figure stepped into view. It was tall and thin, barefoot on the dead grass. Its skin looked stretched, like it had been pulled too tight across the bones. Its head tilted slow, the way a dog studies something it doesn't understand. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. It raised one hand and pointed at the stump, not beckoning, commanding. I backed away, heart hammering so hard I thought I might faint. The thing didn't follow. It just stood there, watching as I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I saw the cabin roof through the trees. When I reached the porch, Travis was already sitting there, shotgun across his lap. He didn't ask where I'd been, didn't say a word. And for the first time, I understood why. He never went into the woods anymore. Chapter 2. Voices at the window. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the old sofa in the main room, the smell of burnt coffee and damp wood, so thick it felt alive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing's arm rising, the pale skin pulling tight as it pointed. Travis sat on the porch until dawn, shotgun across his knees. Once or twice, I heard him mutter something under his breath. Words I didn't recognize. When the sky finally turned gray, he came inside and locked the door behind him. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. I thought maybe morning would make everything feel smaller, more manageable, but when I stepped out onto the porch, the woods looked the same, motionless, expectant, like they'd just paused while the sun was up. I spent the day inside pretending to read an old magazine. Every hour or so I checked the windows. Nothing moved, nothing dared, until the sky started to darken again. Travis didn't go back onto the porch that evening. He just sat in his old recliner, eyes fixed on the door. I asked him what would happen if I went back, if I stepped into that ring. He didn't answer, didn't even blink. After the last scrap of light had drained from the sky, I finally tried to sleep. It must have been after midnight when I woke, not to a sound exactly, more like a pressure, a sense that the air itself was listening. I lay still, breath shallow. Then from the direction of the kitchen window, I heard it, my mother's voice. Mason, she called soft and confused, the way she sounded when she forgot why she'd come into a room. I sat up so fast, the old couch groaned under me. Mason, she said again. It was perfect. Every syllable right, except my mother was hundreds of miles away. I moved to the kitchen doorway, heart thundering. The voice came again, closer this time. Sweetheart, it's so dark out here, let me in. A shape moved past the window, just a blur. I staggered back, my knees hit the cabinets. Travis didn't move, didn't react at all. Please, the voice whispered. I'm cold. I pressed my back to the wall, nails biting into my palms. Outside, something scraped across the boards, then silence. I waited 5 minutes, 10. Nothing. I tried to tell myself it was gone, but as I edged closer to the window, I saw the condensation on the glass. A shape had pressed against it from the outside. 2 wide hands, long fingers, no thumbs. Travis's voice came, then low and brittle. Don't open it, he rasped. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew I wouldn't. Chapter 3. The Footprints That Stopped. The rest of the night passed in a kind of numb haze. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back to the cabinets, the knife clutched in both hands. Every so often I'd think I heard the boards creak or a whisper brush against the walls. But when I strained to listen, there was nothing. I don't think I slept. Just before dawn, Travis stood and walked past me to the back door. He didn't look at me. He opened it slowly and stepped onto the porch, shotgun loose in one hand. I waited, counting each shallow breath. When he came back inside, he met my eyes for the first time. You were lucky, he said. That was all. I didn't ask what he meant. That morning I packed. I told myself it was just to feel ready, that I'd stay another day. But I knew I wouldn't. By midday, I was already walking. I didn't follow the road, didn't trust the roads anymore. I cut across the fields, past the half-rotted fence line, and down into the low places where the moss never dried. I thought maybe if I kept moving, I could outrun it. But the forest doesn't care what you want. The trail dipped into a hollow I didn't recognize. The trees here were older, bark gray as old bone, and carved into them were symbols I hadn't seen before. Circles crossed with broken lines, tiny stick figures with their heads marked out in X's. Each one felt like a warning. I didn't stop. Eventually, I found myself back at the ring of stones. The grass inside was still dead, the stump still pale. The noose still hung from that same branch, swaying though no wind stirred the air. I turned to leave. That was when I saw them. Footprints. A trail of them leading away from the ring, pressed deep into the damp earth. Bare feet, toes splayed wide. They followed the path I'd just come down, one after another, perfectly spaced, and they stopped right where I was standing. I didn't look behind me. Couldn't. I knew what I'd see. I ran. I don't remember the next hour, just the blur of trees and the scrape of my boots against the roots. When I finally broke through the edge of the forest, the road was there. An old truck slowed the driver, gaping at me through the window. I didn't care. I stumbled across the asphalt and kept going, not stopping, until I saw the lights of town. I never went back. But some nights, When sleep won't come, I still feel the space behind me fill up. I still hear the breath I never turned to face. I tried to tell myself that running was enough, that if I never set foot in those woods again, it couldn't follow me. But some places don't care about distance. Some things don't care about the lines we draw on a map. The first week after I came home, nothing happened. I let myself believe it was over, that whatever I'd seen had stayed behind in Franklin Creek. Then one night I woke to the smell of damp earth. I thought maybe I'd left my window open, but when I checked it was locked tight. I turned back toward my bed and froze. A shape was standing in the corner, pale, too tall. It didn't move. It didn't need to, because I could feel it watching. I tried to call out, but no sound came. For a long time, we just stayed like that, me trembling under my sheets, it breathing in the dark. When the sun came up, the corner was empty again, but the smell lingered, and on my windowsill, pressed into the thin layer of dust, were two wide handprints. No thumbs. I don't sleep much anymore, because no matter how long I keep the lights on, part of me knows it's still there, somewhere just past the reach of my voice, waiting for me to look. And I know that when I do, it will smile. Thank you for stepping into the darkness with us. If you felt the chill tonight, don't forget to subscribe to the Ghost Vault, where every story drags something unsettling into the light. Leave a comment, tell us which moment haunted you the most, and share this video with someone who thinks Appalachian legends are just stories. Stay curious, but stay careful. Some places don't forget.